If you have a Bible and you find it helpful, please turn in it to Acts chapter 2. We're going to do something interesting today. I hope it's interesting. It is for me. We're going to actually enter the New Testament era of history. Prior to this, the gospel, you could say that the resurrection of Jesus inaugurated the New Testament, but not quite. It inaugurated a change for sure. It inaugurated that upon which we are established, that is, that Jesus came back from the tomb. But the New Testament starts here. This is where it begins. And it is a prophecy that's being fulfilled, the prophecy of Joel chapter 2. Let's look at the text. I'll begin reading in verse 1 of chapter 2 of Acts. When the day of Pentecost came, they were all gathered together in one accord. Suddenly, a sound like the blowing of a violent wind came from heaven and filled the whole house where they were sitting. They saw what seemed to be tongues of fire that separated and came to rest upon each one of them. All of them were filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other languages as the Spirit enabled them. Now there were staying in Jerusalem God-fearing Jews from every nation under heaven. And when they heard this sound, a crowd came together in bewilderment because each one heard all of these people speaking in their own language. Utterly amazed, they asked, "Are not all of these who are speaking Galileans?" That is to say, they were ignorant. "How is it then that each one of us hears them in his own native language? Parthians, Medes, Elamites, residents of Mesopotamia, Judea and Cappadocia, Pontus, Asia, Phrygia, Pamphylia, Egypt, and the parts of Libya near Cyrene, visitors from Rome, both Jews and converts to Judaism, Cretans and Arabs, we hear them all declaring the wonders of God in our own language." Amazed and perplexed, they asked one another, "What does this mean?" Some, however, made fun of them and said, "They are drunk." Now, it seems like the reaction to this incredible miracle, that should tell us something. There's a clue here. It's not a universally good reaction. There are people who just say, "These people are drunk. This means nothing." I have to wonder at that. I say, did those who thought that not hear in their own language? That's the only thing I can come to. I mean, let's just say, here we are. The reason they point out the fact that they're Galileans is Galileans were seen to be stupid. That's just the way it is. A person who was born and reared and lived in Galilee or was from Galilee, they were seen to be ignorant. They were seen to be somebody who was absolutely uneducated, incapable of doing any of this with regard to what's happening here on this day. Let me just give you an example of this. Let's say that you go on a journey, a trip to Sri Lanka. Just a trip. It's a fun trip. And you walk into a convenience store in Sri Lanka where they speak Hindustani. And the person behind the counter has been speaking in Hindustani, and all of a sudden they speak to you in English and they recite John 3:16. And you think, that's strange. And then you go to a little shop where they're selling things made out of pottery in Sri Lanka, and you think, boy, I'd like to have some of that. And you walk up and the shop owner comes to you and you hear the shop owner speaking in Hindustani, and the next thing you know, they recite John 3:16 to you in English. And then you're walking down the street and you bump into somebody by accident, because in Sri Lanka it's a very densely populated area. You bump into someone on the sidewalk in the marketplace and they turn to you and they begin to speak to you in English, John 3:16. Would you not think something was going on? I would. I'd think, wow, this is really strange. Even if I didn't believe in the gospel at all, I would think to myself, this is unusual. There's something going on here. Some way this is significant for me, because I know I'm in a foreign land. I don't speak Sri Lankan. I don't speak Hindustani, but I'm hearing the works of God in my own language. So it's shocking to me that there were some people who were there that day who heard this happen and they said, I think these people are drunk. That's amazing to me. Is the Spirit of God just now appearing on the earth? No. The Spirit of God, you go all the way back to the beginnings of Genesis, and what do you see? The Spirit of God moved upon the waters. The Spirit of God is God. He has always been. So this is not something new in terms of His existence. but it is something new in terms of our existence in front of Him, you and I. And so, if you go through the book of Acts, you will see things like, so-and-so filled with the Holy Spirit did thus and so. So-and-so filled with the Holy Spirit said thus and so. Something new is happening here. And if you go back to Joel chapter 2, you see the prophecy that shows this to be. What is happening? Joel chapter 2 gives it to us. And we're going to look at that a little bit in the further weeks. But the Spirit of God is coming in specific ways for specific reasons. He's coming to humanity in a new way because up to now, think about it. If you go back in the Old Testament, there were prophets, right? They were guided by the Holy Spirit of God. But everybody else there were priests. They were picked because of the tribe to which they were born, and their father was a priest, and now they grow up as a male in that family. They become a priest. But the Spirit of God, the people are looking at Moses and saying, you tell us what God says. We don't know. But now, what Joel has prophesied is coming to pass. The Spirit of God is filling everybody. That means something for us today. He's going to guide us. He's going to give us the courage and the wherewithal to carry on in this fallen world. And that means a lot to you and me. Because in this fallen world, there are things that are going to happen to us that aren't going to be what we would choose to have happen. And in that, how are we going to walk in those moments of whatever it is we go through? And this is something that if you look at the pages of Acts, there's something about the whole of the book of the Acts that I would say we all need to learn as a lesson. I do. And it's this. The Spirit of God is given in proportion to the obedience of the person. The empowerment of God is given to us in proportion to our obedience. It has nothing to do with our salvation, but it has everything to do with what God calls us to do and be. Now, the first 13 chapters of Luke Acts you will find the Spirit of God referenced 40 times. That's a lot. So clearly there's an important message for us in that. Well, what are they doing here? They're at the Feast of Pentecost. That's significant. We think about Pentecost only in the New Testament way, but this was a Jewish feast. There were 3 Jewish feasts that anybody who was a Jew who lived within 20 miles of Jerusalem was obligated to attend. One of them is Passover. We know what that is. Put the lamb's blood over the lintel of your door. The angel of death passes over your house as you're in Egypt. And every house without the lamb's blood, the angel of death visits. They celebrated that. They celebrated Pentecost, which was 50 days after Passover. 49 actually, but it was called Pentecost, 50th. The 50th day after Passover. And then there was the Feast of Tabernacles, wherein God dwelt with the Jews as they traveled in the wilderness. So this moment in time in history has a significance that maybe you and I don't appreciate. Okay, you notice in the text we read, there were people from all over the known world who were Jews. Why is that? Why was this crowd so cosmopolitan and to them international? There was a reason for it. How many of you in this room go to Fernandina occasionally? Everybody. I mean, we've all been there, right? Fernandina's the beach. That's our beach. I know some Colin goes and Janelle go to Steenhatchee, a different beach. But let's just take Fernandina as it is. What is Memorial Day besides the fact that it is the day in which we commemorate those who have fallen to buy our freedom? It has another significance to us here, though. What is that? Yeah, it's the first day of the vacation period in our calendar. That's exactly what Pentecost was for the Jew. Passover comes at a time of the year where it's really iffy, travel-wise, because of the weather. If you look at a map, you'll see that the United States and Israel, in terms of latitude, are fairly consistent with one another in terms of what the climate would be. They have a real winter. They have a summer. They have a spring. They have a fall. So Pentecost came at a time when it was easy to travel. I remember growing up, we never ever went to Fernandina on Memorial Day because it'd just be packed with people. I don't even want to go. This is the way Jerusalem was on Pentecost. Packed with people from all over the world. So You've got this international crowd hearing the works of God in their own language. The miracle is expanded. There's a practical reason that the miracle was there. At Pentecost, they came to commemorate the fact of the giving of the law on Sinai. They came to commemorate the fact that they'd have a harvest, that it would be a good one. And this is another aspect of this that says a lot of people would come. Good time to travel, but also Pentecost was, as a festival, whether if you were the foot washing slave in a home, you did not work that day. You were off. So Pentecost was a big deal. No servile work. It's just like Memorial Day in Fernandina. That's why there were so many people there. So now what's the significance of this, let's say, in the history of the church? How about that? Well, God is going to interact with humanity in a brand new way. And you all who are in this room today, all of us, we are here today because we are no longer lay people. There is no lay person in Christianity. We are a kingdom of priests. So there is something brand new going on in the world. Your sons and your daughters will be filled, Joel says. The laity is done with. There is no laity. So it sounds awesome. I'm just as you are today. I have sat in congregational settings and I have heard sermons about Acts chapter 2 and the coming of the Holy Spirit and how awesome it is. And you'll hear someone typically use words like thrilling and exciting and awesome and incredible, and every possible hyperbole that can be applied to it is applied, and then the sermon's over and everybody goes home. And the thrilling, awesome, exciting, stupendous goes away. It evaporates. We all open the door, we leave the room, and everything that was thrilling, exciting, and stupendous evaporates. What's the matter? What is the matter? I'm going to say there's a problem we have. I want to read something to you this morning. And I'm not saying you have the problem. I'm saying we have the problem. In Luke chapter 11, Jesus said something very, very, very significant. In chapter 11, verse 5, he says to the disciples, suppose one of you has a friend, and he goes to the friend at midnight and says, friend, lend me 3 loaves of bread because a friend of mine is on a journey and has come to my house, and I've nothing to set before that friend. Well, the one inside the house answers and says, don't bother me. The door is locked. My family and I are in bed. I can't get up and give you anything. You know why that was? Because they all slept in one room. So if you got up and moved around, everybody got waked up. I tell you, though, the dweller of the home will not get up and give the person the bread because they are friends, yet because of the person's boldness and persistence, he will get up and give him as much as he needs. So I say to you, ask and it will be given, seek and you'll find, knock and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, the one who seeks finds, to him who knocks, the door will be opened. Which of you, as fathers, on Father's Day, happy Father's Day to every father in this room, if your son or your child asks for a fish, you'll give them a rock? Or if they ask for an egg, you'll give them a scorpion. If you then, though we are all evil, know how to give good gifts to our children, how much more will your Father in heaven give the Holy Spirit to those who ask? What's the matter with us? I want to ask us a question here, and I say this to myself as preparing this sermon. There's a part of me, and I say this with sincerity, the Lord knows my heart. I like getting sermons ready, but there's a part of me that knows that when I get it ready, I'm going to be dented by the process. I don't like that. This one dents me. I want us to think about this very honestly. You don't answer me, because what I think doesn't matter. Before yourself and the Lord and myself and the Lord, it does matter. Do we come to God and endure, and I use that word specifically, a time of prayer? Endure it, and then expect a reward because of our endurance. How many of you use vending machines? You don't have to raise your hand. I bet everybody in this room has at one time or another used a vending machine, right? I used to use them a lot. When we traveled, we'd stay at hotels, and of course the first thing I would do is figure out where the vending machines and the ice bucket were. I wanted to know where those are important. I mean, if you got to stay in a hotel room, you might as well enjoy something. A cold soda over some ice was always a welcome thing. And then we'd watch a Charles Bronson movie or something on TV, you know. So I would go to the vending machine. Well, you know and I know now that soda that you and I used to pay a dime for is $1.50. At a hotel, they see you coming. They know that it's the only vending machine on the premises, and when you come to it, they're going to get you for what they can. Will he pay $1.50? Yes, he will. So you stick $2 in the machine, it sucks the bills in there, and the change pops out. And let's say you want the package of crackers, and you see the little spring start to turn, and the crackers come right up to the end, and they stop. And the little LED thing across there says, "Enjoy your purchase." And you're looking at the pack of crackers hanging there. What do? I know what I do. I grab the top of the machine, and I see just how far I can. You're going to drop that package of crackers. The package of crackers that I gave my $1.50 for, they're coming out. I guarantee they're coming out. I want to see the manager. If those things don't drop, hey man, I went and put my $1.50 in. I didn't get my cheese crackers. I want my crackers. Think about that image for just a few minutes more. Now look at this group of people that are gathered in this room. They are wildly diverse. You've got good people. You got people that weren't so good. You got prostitutes. You got people who were thieves. You got people who were zealots. And in the process of being a zealot, they probably have killed somebody. They are all in this room waiting. They're looking to Jesus for the same thing. That's very significant. What are they looking for? They don't know. What he promised is all they can tell you. So it's wild. What is keeping this group of people in this room? They don't know what they're waiting for. And guess what? They don't know how long they're going to wait. Show me in the text where Jesus said in 10 days or in 12 days or in 3 hours or in a week, you'll receive the promise. They don't have a clue. I mean, think of it. If somebody told me that and said, just go in there and park in that room with this other 119 people that you really don't know very well and stay there, and when I'll show up with the promise that I'm going to give to you, would we do it? Would we do it? There's something in Luke 11 here that Jesus tells us that we just don't capture in our lives. Could it be that we're not expectant? Let me give you an example here of what I mean by this. I want you to think hard now. As I traveled to, I say this conservatively, I've probably been in 800 churches. Without a doubt. I mean, for 20 years nearly of traveling, and a lot of what we did were churches. Some of those churches, the pastor would get up just as I am now at 11:30 and would start to preach. And 12 o'clock would come and go. I know right now, I can take you there, a church where the preaching starts at 11:30 and it goes for over an hour. Every Sunday. Every Sunday. Rip snow, I have a limit. I say 25 minutes and no more. For a reason. Because I think that it's honorific to people to say, look, 25 minutes is about all anybody can pay attention and absorb anything. I think that's true. Lots of churches don't feel that way. They think, you know what, if we stay here till 1:15, I've been in churches that I didn't get home till after 2 o'clock and it started at 9:30. Why did they do that? I don't mean to impugn anybody's tradition here, but I'm going to tell you what I think. I think they do it because they're shaking the vending machine. And they think if we shake it hard enough, the crackers will fall. Now, I don't say that is a good thing. I don't. These people who were waiting in this upper room were waiting in a different way. They weren't shaking the vending machine. God was doing something real here. It was real. This wasn't somebody, a group of people who just had some notion in their head that if we just wait long enough, God's got to do something. That was not what they were doing. They expected, because of who Jesus was, who Jesus is, that he would keep the promise. See, church overruns. Let's go till 12:15. Let's go to 12. I've had people come, I say this with utter sincerity, and I'll say who it was. I've had it said to me on several occasions, Rip, don't worry about it. Just go on. If you feel like you need to go on past 12, you just carry on. No. The only way that'll happen in here is that God does something. Now, I want to say, I'm not going to shake the vending machine, and I'm not going to shake it for us. But I promise you that if we come to a portion of a service, and I'm not saying today, so don't look at your watch and say, oh my gosh, he's going to go to 1 o'clock. I could. I've been in churches where I was asked to speak, and they said, we want an hour. Okay, well, I'll give you an hour. You know, I can craft a sermon that lasts an hour. I could tell 4 or 5 different stories and add to it, and everybody just sit there for a whole hour while I drone on. I don't think that's fair to the people who have to sit there, because you're a captive audience. I think the right thing is to let God dictate that. You see, I guarantee you that in here today, let's just say that 5 of 12 as it is right now shows up, 6, 7 to 12, whatever that is, and God starts to do something in here. Everybody in this room, nobody's going to want to leave if it's real, if it's the Lord. Everybody will say, we won't even be thinking about leaving. We won't be thinking, gosh, it's almost time for lunch. We won't. And I'm not saying that to be mean. I say it sincerely. I will feel that. You will feel that. But I'm going to say this, that's God's problem. He's got to do that. But we have a problem too. How do we look at him? Do we expect him to show up? Do we expect that God will do something in our midst? Do we want him to do something in our midst? Or is it more important that we get out at 12? Think about it. Look, why are we here? Some people come to church because it's what we always do. Some people come to church because, and I've had this said to me, I feel weird if I don't come to church. I feel bad if I don't feel right if I don't show up for church. And I'm not saying any of those are bad reasons. I'm thankful that some feel motivated to come, myself included. But those kinds of motivations cannot last. They will not last. It'll be all too easy to just say, not today. Unless we really want God to have us, to own us. This service time today, the service time next week, the 10 years prior will all just be times in which they were moderately satisfying periods of time that we spent here in this congregational setting. I want to say these people who are in this upper room would not be satisfied with that. Somehow we are. They would not be satisfied. I don't look at Pentecost and say, wow, thrilling, awesome, exciting. Because if I'm really honest, those words don't strike me in that way. But I want them to. Don't you? Don't you want it to be so real and so exciting and so stupendous and so every adjective that you can apply to it that God has shown up that we don't want to leave? I'm going to do one thing. I'm going to be obedient until he does show up.